When Mark Carney joined Brookfield Asset Management in 2020, he was presented as the perfect person to lead the company's ESG strategy. ESG, for those who don't know, stands for environmental, social, and governance. It's a way of measuring how a company operates beyond just profit, looking at how it impacts the environment, how it treats people, and how it is managed. Carney had spent years talking about climate risk, responsible finance, and the need for businesses to think long-term. ESG was supposed to be about raising standards and making companies more accountable. His message was clear: companies need to do better. But when you look at some of the projects connected to Brookfield during his time there, the situation becomes more complicated. In several countries, including Canada, the United States, Colombia, and Brazil, Brookfield-linked projects have faced disputes involving indigenous communities. These disputes often involve hydroelectric dams or energy infrastructure built on or near traditional lands. The concerns are similar in many places. Indigenous groups have raised questions about whether they were properly consulted. Some say they were not given meaningful consent. Others argue that environmental damage affected their lands, water, and way of life. In Canada, for example, First Nations communities have challenged old hydro agreements, saying they were unfair and do not reflect modern standards of reconciliation. Brookfield has said it follows the law and works within government rules. Supporters argue that large infrastructure projects are complex and that conflicts sometimes happen, especially when projects involve many different stakeholders. But here is where the criticism of Mark Carney comes in. Carney has spoken strongly about responsible capitalism. He has said companies must think beyond profit and consider long-term social and environmental impact. If that is the standard, then simply meeting legal requirements may not be enough. The question becomes, if you promote higher standards in public, should your company also meet higher standards in practice? There is no public evidence that Carney personally managed day-to-day decisions on these projects. His role at Brookfield was focused on strategy, not operations. However, leadership still matters. Leaders help set priorities. They shape company culture. They decide what standards truly matter. If ESG is meant to go beyond the minimum required by law, then critics argue that companies should show clear evidence of strong partnerships with indigenous communities, not repeated disputes across different countries. This does not automatically mean laws were broken. It does not mean wrongdoing has been proven in every case. But it does raise questions about consistency. If you say ESG is about protecting the environment, treating people fairly, and running companies responsibly, then those values should appear not only in speeches and reports, but also in real-world outcomes. That is the core issue. Mark Carney built his reputation on the idea that the financial system must change. Yet during his time at Brookfield, projects connected to the company faced ongoing indigenous rights disputes in multiple countries. For some people, that looks like a gap between words and actions. And in the end, ESG will not be judged by what leaders say. It will be judged by what actually happens on the ground, in communities whose land and livelihoods are directly affected. That is where the real test lies. So how is Mark Carney doing?